Isn't stopping the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into the United States the job of U.S. Customs and Border Security?
So I would agree that that is in terms of it flowing into the States. However, we are wide open. Why aren't we trying to do our part in stopping that flow into Canada to begin with? You know, you look at the meth labs, you look at the fentanyl labs and the components that come in. Where's those products coming from? They're being shipped into this province, and with less than 1% of containers being checked, this is crazy. But what's most important is, you know, we've got a softwood lumber dispute already with the Americans. America is our largest trading partner. They're our strongest ally. We need to be figuring out how we actually work with them. We want to expand trade. We want to get, you know, the softwood lumber problem solved. We have to actually have a trade relationship with these people, not fight with them and not threaten saying we're going to have a trade war.
But to be fair, the softwood lumber issue has been going on for decades and decades. This is not something that just showed up with the Trump administration.
We had a softwood lumber deal until 2016. Since then, since the NDP have been in power, we have not even tried to solve the softwood lumber problem. And it by itself is going to kill the forest industry in British Columbia. You add on tariffs, you basically can say every worker in the forest sector might as well just pack up and move because there isn't going to be a job in this province.
So you don't see using softwood lumber then as a method of retaliation, obviously, or lumber exports to the United States as a method of retaliation?
If we do the right thing, which is, like I say, protecting our borders, stopping the flow of drugs, if we do this right thing, and then Trump comes and says, you're not doing enough, we're going to put on these tariffs, that's free game. Now, you know what, we've got to deal with, you know, a hostile neighbor and how we want to deal with that in terms of trade. But we shouldn't be planning to do that. Like, Brenda Bailey had come out and talked about all of the jobs that'll be lost, the money that's going to be lost, the impact, those lives and families that'll be devastated if we get into a trade war. We should be doing everything we can to avoid that, not try to figure out, you know, how we can fire a pop gun, you know, at the U.S. border compared to our largest trading partner.
The federal government has announced measures to strengthen border security. They've committed spending $1 billion on it. Given that, you still have, even knowing that, Donald Trump is still threatening 25% tariffs beginning on February 1st. How do you negotiate with that when you say, you demonstrate you're doing your best, here's our plan to beef up border security, here's how much money we're going to spend on it, and yet there's no change from the other side?
What is it, 9,000 miles of border and $1 billion? It's an interesting number.
How much would you spend?
First of all, I'm not in the federal arena, so I don't know how much to spend there, but I can tell you what I would spend in British Columbia. I would have come in and spent probably $40 or $50 million, if not more, right away. We would call back the legislature back in November and actually dealt with getting our ports protected, getting a force put in place to deal with these drugs and what's going into our country. Now, working with the federal government on the U.S. border is a different issue. We should have been doing that, but our ports are a big issue.
It is. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But I do think, again, we're talking about two very separate things. And yes, you make a very good point, which is, you know, you're right. Less than 1% of the containers that come through the ports are inspected. We know we get a lot of drugs coming in from Asia. We know that we no longer have a ports police service, for instance, to monitor the ports. That's an issue, but that's not the issue that we're talking about with the United States right now.
But it is, because it's related. These drugs are coming into our country. They're not coming up from the United States. Well, some may be coming from the United States. We don't actually even know how much comes from the United States. But when we're talking about stopping the flow of drugs, we need to be able to do that at source, which means at our ports coming into this country. Now, Mexico, you got all the migrants coming up through Mexico. That's a big deal. There is some issue going back and forth across the border, but I think what Trump is more concerned about coming from Canada is the flow of drugs. I mean, they have a problem just like we do with the number of people that are dying from fentanyl. He wants to see that come to an end. Mm-hmm. We want it to come to an end too. We should be dealing with this.
President Trump has, you know, threatened to annex Canada, and you know, while you can take that seriously or not, you're laughing, but he said that, you know, he could use economic means to hurt Canada, and already he's you know, doing that or threatening to do that with these tariffs. What is a strategy that you think would be successful in trying to negotiate with somebody like Donald Trump?
You know, I'm sorry, I'm smiling at that because, look, I don't know anybody that wants to become an American. And, you know, and maybe there's some people that do. I'm certainly not interested in becoming an American and being the 51st state. But there might be a silver lining to what Donald Trump has done. Why don't we have a Canada-wide free trade agreement? it's easier for me to do trade with the United States, before Trump came around with tariffs, than it is to do trade with Ontario or Quebec or other provinces. We actually should be, as a province, focusing on let's get a Canada-wide free trade agreement happening. And while we do that, let's try to reimagine who we are as a Canada. Let's start thinking as a country. We actually should be thinking about how we renew our confederation. This is the best country in the world. We have everything we could ever want, except we're hopelessly managed. This needs to change. And if Trump becomes the impetus for us to actually start having a conversation about being Canadian, that's not such a bad thing.
I'm wondering what you think about Donald Trump's first moves as President of the United States, about the number of executive orders that he signed and what he's included in those executive orders. Do you agree with, disagree with any of them or all of them?
I actually haven't even looked at them. I haven't paid a whole lot of attention because that's a jurisdiction south of the border. But what I do look at is this, from a pure political perspective, Donald Trump knows the clock is ticking. He's got a year or two to get a whole bunch of things done. After that, they've got midterms, right? The Congress and Senate may change, and then he becomes a lame duck. So he's got a short period of time. So he's going to come in full guns blazing. People should expect that. That is what he is going to do. Right or wrong, it is what it is.
The president of your party, Aisha Este, was at the Trump inauguration, and she was wearing a pin that said, "Make Canada Great Again." Again, you're smiling. Is that the right message to be sending in this political climate?
I am a true believer in Canada. I'm proud to be Canadian. I'm proud to be British Columbian, right? I'm proud of this country that we have. Why wouldn't we want to make sure that British Columbians come first, that we deal with Canada, like we make sure, as I said, we have the flow of trade, that we have a sense of who we are, that we actually strengthen this country. We could be an economic powerhouse. We could have the best living standards in the world. Why wouldn't we want to try to achieve that as a country and as a province?
Is Ms. Este's presence at the inauguration, is that an endorsement of Donald Trump and everything he stands for?
I didn't even know that she was going to it, and I saw the picture of it, and that's why I kind of chuckled when I saw it. I thought, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. People are free to do what they want to do in terms of it, but what I am focused on as the Conservative Party of British Columbia is fighting for British Columbians, making sure that we do everything we can to improve our quality of life, improve affordability. I'm a proud Canadian. We need to be doing the same thing as Canada. That's where we need to be focused.
If Premier Eby asked you to work with him to come up with a solution, would you?
I would certainly do anything that is in the interest of making sure that we improve the lives of people in British Columbia, that we deal with the unaffordability issue and many of these other things, and make sure, quite frankly, we put people back to work, like, for example, in our forest sector.
John Rustad, really appreciate you coming in this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me in.
Appreciate the time. BC Conservative leader John Rustad.